2021.
Yeah, I hope so too. So the first two on your list, Tom, are the pandemic, either from a vaccine perspective or from a recovery perspective. Trump said the U.S. would have a vaccine before Election Day. That didn't really come to pass exactly, but now we do have a few that have been announced, and it's still not clear when the general populace will get them. And I realize this might have been the toughest one to call when you had to make this list back in October. But what's your sense since making the list? Is 2021 still going to be the year of the vaccine? Will it take the whole year for it to deploy?
Well, the first thing to say is that I don't think there was ever a prospect of a vaccine arriving before the US election. So that was simply Trump talking nonsense as usual. We knew all along that the phase 3 trials for those vaccines, which had begun in the summer, were going to take a certain amount of time. They were going to have to register a certain number of cases. And then once that had happened, we were going to get the first efficacy data. And then once that had happened, you would be able to put those vaccines forward for emergency authorization, which is not the kind of standard approval that you have of a new drug. It's a special sort of fast-tracked approval for emergency use. And we expect the vaccines to go through emergency authorization and then sort of formal approval. But emergency authorization means you can start using them in, frontline health workers and so on. And in fact, the UK has just approved, so it's just announced emergency authorization for one of the vaccines. And so there are going to be people receiving shots before the end of the year, and there aren't going to be very large numbers of them. The other thing is that these vaccines tend to involve 2 injections, 2 or 3 weeks apart, or possibly 4 weeks apart in one of them, actually. So that means we're going to have people who get the first shot before the end of the year and the second shot at the beginning of next year. So the vaccines are here, but we now face the challenge not of the scientific problem of developing them, but the logistical problem of distributing them. And that is going to be the story of 2021, that we will have the scientific knowledge that we need, but will we actually have the vaccines in quantity? Will we be able to get them to where we want them, keep them cold, get them into people's arms? Will we have enough glass? Will we have enough needles? Will we have enough people? And then you've got the logistical problem of, the Pfizer vaccine, for example, comes in batches of 975 doses. So when you open it, you've got to use all those doses basically right away. You have to keep it at -70 or below. If once you've opened it, you have to use them in the space of a few days, and then you have to gather those 975 people again 3 weeks later to give them the second shot. So we're in a different world now, and it's a logistical sort of deployment challenge. And what we've seen during 2020 with things like testing and tracing and so forth is that some countries, some parts of the world have been better at this than others. Some have been more organized. Some have had health services that are structured in a way that can cope with these sorts of demands more than others. Some have had stronger political leadership and so on. And I think we're going to see a lot of that sort of variation in 2021 as well. Some countries are just going to be better organized when it comes to getting the vaccine to their populace than others. And so we're going to see presumably a lot of politicization around those arguments, who gets vaccines first, both within countries and between countries, and so on. So yes, vaccines are coming in 2021. The other thing you asked was, will everyone get it by the end of 2021? And the answer to that is a very straightforward no. There isn't going to be enough vaccine production in the world to vaccinate everyone on Earth just mathematically until, I think the Serum Institute says 2023 to 2024. But that's not the end of the world, because actually you can suppress the virus very effectively if you start with the frontline health workers, with the most vulnerable populations. There's then a bit of a debate about who you vaccinate next. Do you vaccinate the people at most risk, or do you vaccinate the people who are actually spreading the virus the most? So, do you vaccinate the students? Because although they're younger and at less risk, they are actually, they're spreading it a lot because they're mixing. So there's a debate to be had about that too, but I would have thought that there will be reasonably widespread vaccination by the end of the year. Reasonably widespread possibly means less than 50% of the population in a lot of rich countries. In developing countries it will take longer, but we have seen that the impact of the pandemic has been particularly concentrated in rich countries, chiefly because they have older populations, and this is a disease that primarily kills older people.
In terms of the developing versus developed countries, are there ways that you've heard of that people are